I discovered this in a way that can't be explained as coincidence. It was more like finding a piece that had always been there, visible, accessible, waiting, but that nobody had ever shown me how to fit into place. Like that feeling of looking at something familiar for years and suddenly seeing an entirely new dimension that was always present, but that your eyes simply weren't trained to capture. After years of observing the human mind, not superficially, not in the big dramatic events, but in the most silent details, in the most subtle patterns, in the nuances that most people dismiss as irrelevant, I started noticing something that repeated itself with an almost unsettling precision, a pattern, not in one person, not in two, in many, with variations in age, context, lifestyle, but with a surprisingly consistent underlying structure, and it always started small. A name that took too long to come when you needed it. You know the situation. You're in the middle of a presentation or a social conversation, and you need to mention someone you know, someone whose name you absolutely know, and the name simply doesn't show up. You buy time. You work around it. You hope the other person doesn't notice the hesitation, but you notice. A forgotten appointment, a simple task that gets lost in the middle of the day. You were doing something, got interrupted for a second, and when you came back, the thread was simply gone. You stare at the screen, at the paper, at your own hands, trying to reconstruct what you were doing less than a minute ago. Nothing alarming individually, until it stops being occasional and starts becoming frequent. And that's exactly the point where something changes. Not just in the frequency of the forgetting, but in you. You start noticing. And when you notice, you start questioning yourself, because it's not just forgetting anymore. It's forgetting more times than you should. It's losing objects with a frequency that didn't exist before. Keys, glasses, documents, items you use every day that suddenly seem to have a life of their own. It's locking up mid-sentence, feeling the thought dissolve before reaching the end, and having to improvise a vague conclusion. It's that sudden emptiness in the middle of a conversation, as if someone had erased part of what you were about to say, exactly at the moment you were about to say it. And the most uncomfortable part of all, not knowing whether this is just distraction or something deeper happening. I've seen this in many people over the years, and what caught my attention wasn't the forgetting itself, it was the reactions, the way people responded internally to these moments, the narrative that started to build, because when forgetting is rare, the narrative is simple. I'm tired, I had a hard day, I need more sleep. These are explanations that don't threaten your self-image. They are temporary, but when the forgetting becomes frequent, when the pattern settles in, the narrative changes. And it changes in a way that is silent, gradual, and deeply corrosive. You start questioning yourself in situations that used to be automatic. You start hesitating before speaking, because you're not sure you'll be able to hold the reasoning all the way to the end. You begin avoiding contexts where memory might let you down. Meetings, important conversations, social situations that used to be simple but now carry a subtle tension. You develop compensation systems. You write down things you used to simply remember. You check your phone multiple times to confirm information you already know, but no longer trust yourself to recall. You ask people to repeat things not because you didn't hear, but because you need more time to process. And each time you do that, the narrative reinforces itself. Each compensation is a silent confirmation that something is wrong. And that is the cruelest trap, because you're not just dealing with a less efficient memory, you're dealing with a deteriorated relationship with your own mind. At some point, I started recognizing these signs as something beyond isolated events. They follow patterns that, when you learn to see them, stop looking random, Stop looking like fate. Stop looking inevitable. And that's exactly what changed the way I understand memory. Because the truth that most people never hear clearly and directly, is that memory doesn't disappear out of nowhere. It responds. It is a dynamic system, not a static capacity. It isn't a container that fills up until it overflows and then starts leaking. It is a process, a set of neurobiological mechanisms that are in constant adaptation, constant reorganization, constant response to the environment you create for them, and the environment you create through your habits, your daily choices. The stimulation you offer or fail to offer your brain shapes that system in ways far deeper than most people realize. Memory responds to what you do every day, to the stimulation you give or fail to give, to the habits that seem small, but that, over time, completely shape the way the brain processes, stores, and retrieves information. And it's exactly this process, how to identify the patterns that are weakening your memory and how to reverse them in a structured way, that we detail in the guide available at the first link in the description. Click now and access it. But what is this specific behavior I mentioned? What is this piece that was always there, but that nobody showed how to fit into place? It is intentional cognitive stimulation. And I need to be precise here, because there is a very common misconception about what this actually means. Cognitive stimulation is not doing crossword puzzles. It's not playing Sudoku. It's not downloading a brain training app and doing the same exercises repeatedly until they become automatic. Because when an activity becomes automatic, it stops stimulating the brain in any meaningful way. The brain learns through challenge, through novelty, through situations that require it to form new connections, recruit different neural networks, process information in ways that aren't yet familiar. Intentional cognitive stimulation means exposing the brain to genuine, varied challenges on a consistent basis. It means learning something you genuinely don't know, not reviewing something you already master. Learning a new language activates completely different networks from those you use in your native language. Learning to play an instrument simultaneously recruits motor coordination, auditory processing, notation, reading, and sequence memory, a combination of demands that very few activities can replicate. It means solving problems that don't have an obvious answer, that require you to hold multiple variables in mind at the same time, test hypotheses, revise conclusions, think non-linearly. It means having deep, challenging conversations, not superficial exchanges of information, but discussions that require you to articulate complex ideas, respond to unexpected arguments, maintain coherence in a long line of reasoning. It means reading dense content that requires interpretation, not passive consumption, but active reading where you're constantly connecting what you're reading to what you already know, questioning premises, forming opinions. Each of these activities, when practiced consistently, stimulates the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This protein is essential for the formation of new synapses, the strengthening of existing connections, and the protection of neurons against degeneration. In simple terms, the more you challenge your brain with genuinely new and complex tasks, the stronger it gets. The more you operate on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, consuming the same types of content, avoiding cognitive challenges, the more it accommodates. And accommodation, in the context of the brain, is not neutral. It's decline. But cognitive stimulation is only one of the mechanisms. There's another factor that is equally critical and perhaps even more overlooked. Attention. Not in the sense of paying attention. In the neurobiological sense, the capacity to keep focus on a single thing for a sustained period, without interruptions and without dividing cognitive resources. We live in an era where that capacity is being systematically dismantled. Notifications, infinite feeds, short videos specifically engineered to maximize attention switching, constant multitasking, the permanent feeling that something more urgent, more interesting, more important is happening in some other tab. And the result is a brain that has learned to operate in fragmented mode, a brain that has lost the capacity to go deep. And here's the specific problem for memory. The formation of long-term memories requires sustained attention. For information to be transferred from working memory to long-term memory, for it to be truly recorded, the brain needs to process that information with sufficient depth. When attention is constantly fragmented, that consolidation process gets compromised. Information enters working memory, but never gets adequately transferred. It's available for minutes or hours and then disappears. That's why you can remember something immediately after hearing it. But when you try to retrieve it hours or days later, it simply isn't there. It wasn't forgotten, it was never adequately formed. The solution isn't complex, but it requires something that goes against the current of modern life. Deliberate periods of focused, uninterrupted attention, working on a single task for blocks of 25 to 50 minutes, without notifications, without context switching, without divided attention, reading without interruption, having conversations without checking your phone, allowing the brain to enter states of deep processing, the states where real memory formation happens, simple, accessible, and making a difference that most people vastly underestimate. The third factor is spaced repetition. This is one of the most well-documented principles in cognitive psychology and one of the most rarely applied outside academic contexts. Spaced repetition is based on a phenomenon called the spacing effect. The brain forms more durable memories when it revisits information at increasing intervals rather than reviewing everything at once. In practice, this means that if you want to remember something, a name, an important piece of information, a concept, the most efficient approach isn't immediate repetition. It's waiting a period, actively trying to retrieve it, and repeating that process at gradually increasing intervals. Each time you actively retrieve a memory, especially when there's some effort involved, you are strengthening the neural pathway associated with it. You are literally making that memory more robust, more accessible, more resistant to forgetting. This isn't theory, it is a documented neurobiological mechanism, observable in neuroimaging studies, and the practical application is surprisingly straightforward. Revisit important information at scheduled intervals 1 day later, 3 days later, 1 week later, 2 weeks later. Apps like Anki were built precisely on this principle and are used by medical students, lawyers, and professionals who need to retain large volumes of information reliably. But you don't need an app, you need the principle. Actively review, try to retrieve before consulting, space the repetitions, and let the brain do the work it was designed to do. Now, if you're living this, forgetting names, appointments, simple tasks, losing objects frequently, or locking up mid-sentence, pay close attention to what I'm about to say. These signs are not a verdict. They are information. The brain doesn't fail because of a lack of capacity. It doesn't fail because you don't have a good memory. It doesn't fail for mysterious and uncontrollable reasons. It fails from a lack of direction, because it has gone on autopilot, because the stimulation it needs to maintain and strengthen its functions has been gradually replaced by patterns that offer little or no real challenge. It needs repetition, intention, the right stimulation. Without that, it operates below its potential. But when you change that pattern, the brain responds, and that response starts showing up in details. Small ones at first, but extremely significant. You remember something without having to strain. You finish a sentence with more confidence. You maintain a line of reasoning without getting lost in the middle. You stop needing to write down things you used to simply know, and gradually the confidence comes back. If you want to understand how to apply these principles in a structured way in your daily life with a clear, practical, evidence-based method, click the first link in the description now. The guide we prepared details exactly how to get started, and this is what most people don't understand. There is no magic. There is consistency. There is a path, and it is more accessible than it seems because it doesn't require special resources, doesn't require hours of daily dedication, doesn't require a radical life overhaul. It requires direction. It requires intention. It requires the willingness to replace habits that are weakening your brain with habits that are strengthening it, and that substitution, done gradually and consistently, produces changes that are visible not just in formal cognitive tests, but in everyday experience, in the way you feel when you wake up, in the quality of your presence in conversations, in the confidence with which you navigate situations that used to generate anxiety, in the capacity to be fully present, not just physically, but mentally. Today, I no longer see those early signs the same way, not as a problem without a solution, not as something to be accepted resignedly, not as the inevitable beginning of a decline that will only get worse. I see them as an alert, an invitation to adjust what needs to be adjusted, a signal that the system is asking for something different, and that you have the capacity to respond to that request. And when you respond to that alert with awareness, with structure, with the right tools, you recover something far greater than memory. You recover control, clarity, presence, and the security of knowing that your mind can still function better than you imagine, that the decline you were fearing isn't destiny, it's direction, and direction can be changed. If you're frustrated by forgetting important things, constantly losing objects, or locking up when you're speaking, the method we left in the pinned comment and in the first link of the description was created exactly for this. It's practical, grounded in real evidence, and shows you how to recover mental clarity and confidence in your own memory step by step. Don't put it off. Click now. If this content made sense to you, if at any point while watching you recognized yourself in what I described, then subscribe to the channel, because in the upcoming videos I'll keep showing you, in a practical way grounded in real observation, how to strengthen, protect, and unlock your mind's true potential. No magic formulas, no impossible promises, only what works applied in a way that anyone can understand and put into practice. Because your mind is capable of far more than what you're seeing right now, and the path to get there starts exactly here.